Hello and welcome to Kent Tonight live on KMTV. I'm Kristen Hawthorne and here are your top stories on Thursday the 19th of March. Streeting steps into Canterbury. The Health Secretary announces a widening of vaccination programme.
We're expanding the availability of the vaccine today too, so we should expect to see more people coming through.
Better estate of mind. Red Door Homes in Rochester offering to cover the cost of therapy for stressed staff.
So we deal with lots of traumatic stuff. We might deal with people who are victims of domestic violence, people who are, again, going through a divorce, going through financial difficulties. So all of that stuff has an impact on the staff.
And from the manosphere to movie manners, we'll be speaking to Chris Deasy on Louis Theroux and Brit's biggest cinema gripes. Our top story this evening, cases of meningitis will continue to increase. That's what the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care told reporters during his visit to the University of Kent Canterbury campus today. It comes as day 2 of the vaccine rollout continues and the government widen the net of those who are eligible. But are they doing enough to protect people here in Kent? Chloe Brewster has been on the story all week and went down there to try and put that question to the Health Minister.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been at the University of Kent Canterbury campus today as hundreds of worried students received a vaccine to protect them against the meningitis outbreak that's currently ripping through our county. The visit coincided with the announcement that the jab is being offered to more people. All staff and students at the University of Kent, regardless of age, can now get the vaccine. Canterbury Christchurch students and pupils at a few select secondary schools will have it too. It's unclear if staff at these organisations will have the opportunity to have the vaccine, like their Uni of Kent counterparts. Anyone who's been to Club Chemistry since the 5th of March can also have it. If you went clubbing there, you're being urged to come forward. There are still a lot of unanswered questions about the rollout, but KMTV and Kent Online couldn't ask the Minister, as local press was shut out from his visit, with only national media allowed in the building. However, he did have a few seconds on his way out, and he said this.
Yeah, I think we've seen a really brilliant response here. The way in which the NHS team has mobilised so quickly, they've done a great job. We're expanding the availability of the vaccine today too, so we should expect to see more people coming through. We've got effective treatment through the antibiotics, an effective vaccination campaign. The risk here in Canterbury remains low and across the country extremely low, so I hope people can take confidence and reassurance from that.
The widening of the vaccine rollout begs the question, has an entire generation been let down by the government? While MenB vaccines began being offered to babies from 2015, teenagers off to university were never offered it, despite young adults being an at-risk group. That's why 40 MPs, including Canterbury's Rosie Duffield, are urging a catch-up vaccination programme for students.
As a parent here in Canterbury myself, I know that Year 13s are often at those clubs and mixed together, sometimes in the same groups as the uni students. And I think it is important to educate Year 13s, Year 12s even coming up to that age, and to vaccinate Year 13s if we can possibly do that and roll it out. It is odd that we have that weird cut-off date. I'm not sure why, because it's not as if this has gone away. So I think we need to look at that very seriously. We need to look at the education of younger people. This is a fact of life. This disease is out there. We do need to equip young people to just have a normal life, especially people who have suffered from the lockdown and the sort of horrible impact that had on your social lives. So yeah, I'd like that to just be seen as a normal thing, that you get vaccinated and therefore you're a lot safer.
The open letter by MPs read that no family should have to discover too late that protection was available, but not available to many on our NHS. The vaccine costs several hundred to buy in a pharmacy and is now sold out in several areas in Kent. As for the numbers, 1,500 have been vaccinated so far, and the total of confirmed and suspected cases on day 5 now is at 27. But by tomorrow morning, what will that number stand at, and will the Health Secretary have any clear answers about when this crisis will pass? Well, we hope he'll have the time to tell us if he ever returns to the county. Chloe Brewster for KMTV in Canterbury.
Well, Chloe joins me now to tell me a little bit more about what it was like down there today as you were denied the opportunity to speak to Wes Streeting.
Yes, so we knew that Wes Streeting was coming down just from intel that we had, but we had no idea what time he was coming, where he was actually coming to. It was a bit of an investigational moment trying to find out when he'd get there. When we did eventually find out, it was around 11ish, I believe. And we got to campus and we immediately get to the sports hall, and all of the press that were invited, obviously all inside, speaking to Streeting. We asked to get in, we spoke to the press officer there. He told us he'd get back to us and never did. I then followed that up later on, still never did. Me and my colleague Brad from Kent Online were stood outside for about 2 hours waiting for the opportunity to speak to us. When he did eventually leave, he sped right past us, did a statement at the end. We didn't have an opportunity to ask him a question. I think that's quite shocking considering the national media have been approaching us, asking for contacts to people and who best to speak to about what's going on in the county. But when it's a big name, we're not invited along to ask some questions for the people who are watching us every day.
Well, there's also some MPs calling for the expansion of the vaccine rollout as well. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so Rosie Duffield, obviously, that we saw in my piece, but Sojan Joseph, Helen Whately, as well as several others are also calling for that expansion. They're urging the government to ensure that there's a review into how the vaccine is routinely rolled out, so whether that should be introduced back into secondary schools. Because, as I say in the piece, from 2015, many of us do not have... 2015, babies are being vaccinated against MenB, but the rest of us, teenagers, haven't been. They also calling for universities across the country to introduce a catch-up programme so university students won't be at risk into the future, but that again is just in a letter at the moment, so that isn't confirmed by the government. They also want to improve awareness to students and families about how you can get this, things like sharing drinks, sharing vapes, and just being overall safe on a night out.
All right, excellent, and we'll hear a bit more from you about that later on in the show. Thank you so much, Chloe. An inquest has ruled that a 9-year-old girl has drowned after falling into the River Thames at Gravesend. Louise Sapon, also known as Bia, was playing on a jetty at Gordon Promenade when she fell into the water in May last year. A young boy, along with a member of the public and the girl's uncle, jumped in to try and rescue her. However, it was not until the following day that her body was discovered. Floral tributes were left at the scene with members of her family describing her as a beautiful angel who had her whole life ahead of her. There have since been calls for better safety measures and signage along the riverbank. A suspect has been charged after a stabbing on Mill Road in Gillingham, which led to an armed police response. Around 10 police cars and an ambulance were called to the area on Wednesday the 19th of March, shortly before 12 p.m. Both locals and students from the nearby college watched on and cheered as the 28-year-old suspect was arrested. Daniel Barrier of Mill Road has since been charged with causing grievous bodily harm with intent and possession of a bladed weapon in public. He was due to appear at Medway Magistrates Court earlier today. The teenage victim that was rushed to the hospital following the stabbing suffered injuries that are not thought to be life-threatening or life-changing. When was the last time you were stressed at work? Well, a Rochester estate agent is footing the bill for counselling to help their employees manage the difficulties of their job. Andy Wicking of Red Door Estates has noticed a marked change in his staff since he hired an on-site therapist. He urges the public to remember that they're frequently under a lot of pressure and they're human too, as Megan Shaw has been finding out.
If I asked you to name a job so stressful a director has arranged for on-site counselling, you might think of a team of brain surgeons or firefighters. But for this estate agent in Rochester, it's become a non-negotiable.
Obviously, as an estate agent, you're dealing with one of the most stressful things in life. You know, moving home, I think death and divorce are all up there. So from a day-to-day, if it's on the estate agent side, people moving house is extremely stressful because of the reasons they may be actually moving. So we deal with lots of traumatic stuff. We might deal with people who are victims of domestic violence, people who are, again, going through a divorce, going through financial difficulties. So all of that stuff has an impact on the staff, and it's stuff we just have to deal with every single day.
The managing director of Red Door employs 19 staff members across its 2 branches in the county, and each one has access to free drop-in sessions with a qualified therapist.
I'm just part of the team, like you said. Some people I see more regularly, some people like the routine, and we've gone on a bit of a journey. Other people will just pop in. Some people say, well, I haven't got anything to talk about, and then an hour later, they're still here. Yeah, it's really powerful. People underestimate the power of listening.
Sharon has been working with Red Door for 2 years. and knows only too well the kind of unique pressures an estate agent might be under, as well as the intense scrutiny that comes from being in the public eye. Red Door Homes recently experienced lots of negative criticism when one of their company cars was found parked on double yellow lines in Canterbury, except they had a permit to be there.
And that member of staff that drives that car said, I don't want to drive that car anymore. I don't want to drive it around town. And someone stopped and walked in front of their car and looked through the windscreen, and somebody had threatened to burn the car, smash the car up, slash the tyre, all of this. And you go, that individual has to deal with that. And then we had to sit and go, how do I deal with that? I went to walk across Canterbury, across town, and someone said, I don't want to walk with you because I don't want to be associated with you because of the backlash on social media. So we then said, I put something out on social media and said, we are human beings as well.
The counselling available here seems to have opened doors for the staff. Yet Andy's mission to the public to keep that same open mindset for his team does not yet seem to be over. Megan Shaw for KMTV in Rochester.
If you've been affected by anything we've talked about in the programme so far, you can head to the government website for more information. But now it's time for a quick break. But coming up, our reporter Megan Shaw will be joining us to tell us a bit more about what is deemed to be the worst prison in the country, not even the county. Well, all of that and more to come in just a few minutes. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome back to Kent Tonight Live here on KMTV. Now, a Kent prison has been named the worst prison in the country in a report that details inmates having nothing to do all day and frequent drug smuggling. HMP Swaleside on Sheppey was visited early in December 2025, and a report published today described the prison as unsafe, risky, and some of the conditions around the place being really poor. Megan Shaw joins me now to discuss this more. Tell me about this report, Megan.
Absolutely. So the Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor, he published a very quite damning report on HMP Swaleside after inspection visits that took place throughout December. He mentioned lots of issues that were wrong with the prison, such as you mentioned, there poor opportunities for inmates to progress, a lot of them doing very long sentences, and inexperienced staff under lots of pressure. But of course, Mr. Taylor mentioned many issues, so let's hear it from him here.
It shows a prison that's in a complete state. We found it was unsafe, risky. We found some of the conditions around the place were really poor. Staff-prisoner relationships, despite staff really trying their best, were very strained, inexperienced staff, very experienced prisoners. The regime was terrible, and basically what that means is prisoners were locked up all day with almost nothing to do. Loads of drugs were getting into the prison as well. It was the worst scores I've given out since I've been Chief Inspector, which is really pretty worrying.
So how important is HMP Swaleside here in Kent then?
Absolutely. So the HMP Swaleside is a Category B men's prison in Eastchurch on the Isle of Sheppey. At the time of the inspections, it contained 879 men. Category B, that's fairly high security. And, you know, there needs to be a level of control and authority from the staff, although the report mentioned that wasn't there, which obviously is a huge issue. So most of these men are serving long or indeterminate sentences. So it's really important that these men serving these long sentences have the opportunity to kind of better themselves or rehabilitate, and unfortunately, as the report said, that just wasn't available.
All right, thank you, Megan. OK, a dating app fraudster has been sentenced to 3 years in prison at Canterbury Crown Court for conning men out of thousands of pounds. Thomas Godden posed as a gay man on Tinder and Bumble while simultaneously in a heterosexual relationship and scammed 3 victims out of £30,000. Mr. Godden left one man in crippling debt, bribing him out of more than £26,000 to fund his lifestyle. He was arrested in Folkestone and pleaded guilty to 3 counts of fraud by false representation in December 2025. Claire Campbell, Senior Crown Prosecutor at CPS, said romance fraud is a cruel crime that preys on the unique trust that exists in intimate relationships and shows real manipulation. Britain's biggest fish and chips chain is set to open up to the country's largest Wetherspoons in Ramsgate. Papa's Fish and Chips, a 60-year-old family business with over 20 outlets, including the world's largest fish and chip shop in North Lincolnshire, is due to open a venue beside the Royal Pavilion. The fish and chip shop will offer both a restaurant and takeaway service and aims to open in time for the summer. In 2017, Papa's was voted Britain's best chippy in a BBC televised search, with Michelin-starred chefs on the judging panel. A spokesman said, "We look forward to serving the local community very soon." And now it's time to take a look at all the sports news from across the county with Tim Forster.
First up, and Gills manager Gareth Ainsworth claims the future looks great in the face of tough results. Despite Tuesday's 2-0 loss to Swindon, their first defeat to the team since 1986, Ainsworth remained optimistic, claiming, "No one will outdo my positivity and my spirit." The Gills remain 16th in League Two and have now lost 3 games in a row to teams challenging for promotion. The team conceded 5 goals in their match against MK Dons last week, a result that Cambridge United repeated, and they've not had a victory since February. Chairman Brad Gallinson praised the fan support despite the sticky patch the team are in at the moment. Gillingham will face off against Bristol Rovers at home this Saturday. Gravesend Grammar School have narrowly been beaten in their quest for national glory in the final of the Continental Tires School Cup. After finding themselves 15-0 down in the 24th minute against Hymers College, Gravesend managed a strong comeback to claim 28 points. However, it was not enough to beat their opponent's lead of 32. Mark Robinson, the school's director of sport, expressed pride at his team's efforts, despite losing out in the final of the prestigious national rugby competition, describing the performance as an excellent fight back. Steve Granger, the RFU's Executive Director of Rugby Development, claims you are inevitably watching some stars of the future in these tournaments. And finally, Margate is set to play host to the British Mini Golf Championships this weekend. The event, which is organised by the British Mini Golf Association, will be held at Strokes Adventure Golf on Westbrook Promenade and will consist of 7 rounds over the course of the weekend. Westbrook have been hosting official tournaments by the BMGA for almost 20 years. In total, more than 50 players are expected to take part, including 13-time British Women's Champion Ruth Sturdy and 5-time World Crazy Golf Champion Mark Chapman. In excess of £700 is expected to be won with the award ceremony on Sunday. And that's all we have time for with your sports news. We'll see you soon.
And now don't forget you can keep up to date with all our latest stories across Kent by logging onto our website kmtv.co.uk. There you'll find all our reports, including this one about Kent Wildlife Trust urging visitors not to get too close to the animals on its Hothfield Heathland site after TikTok showing a woman petting them went viral. So I went down to the reserve to see both the cows, the horses and some of the staff there to find out more. A typically quiet nature reserve in the Kent countryside has recently found itself in the spotlight. It's because of a recent TikTok video that went viral, showing the visitor petting one of the Highland cows. Since then, the site has seen hundreds of people hoping to do the same thing. But Kent Wildlife are urging people to rethink.
Part of that video was her approaching the cows quite closely and at one instance sort of going to pet them. And that isn't something that we advise. It's not part of our guidance around working with our livestock here. It is a public site, a lot of people use the site, but that TikTok went viral. And so we've seen a massive influx of people onto the site, especially at the weekends. Lots of families, lots of couples, lots of people coming to enjoy the Highland cows and take photos with them. It all took off really because we obviously saw this video and we have also needed to sort of address how you interact with these animals on site safely.
If you're coming to the Heathland to see the Highland cows, this is as far as you should be to get a picture. Otherwise, the animals can get quite distressed and it can have negative impacts on their grazing.
Disturbance is a massive issue. Obviously, it's great that people come down to experience it, but when we get people coming off the pathways, we're potentially stressing not just our animals, but also the wildlife additionally present on the site. The cows, if they keep getting pressure, will try and leave as best they can, but when you've got 500 people across an area of heath like this, there's not always places for them to hunker or hide.
While the viral video has brought many people to the reserve, one family said a different post online encouraged them to keep their distance, showing the impact social media can have.
We saw videos, was it Facebook or TikTok?
I saw it on TikTok, yeah, and Vicky loves Highland cows.
So we thought we'd come down, yeah.
And what did you think about the TikTok when she started stroking the cow and everything?
Oh, we didn't see that one. Yeah, so we didn't actually see that one, but we saw a post after that was just warning people not to get too close, and which obviously is quite sensible.
Yeah, stay away, don't touch them.
Why do you think you wouldn't touch them?
Well, they're wild animals, not to interrupt them, and obviously they can be dangerous as well.
The Trust says that you shouldn't pet or feed the animals, including the ponies that are also on site, because it can contaminate biodiversity in the area and cause an overdependence on humans. While Kent Wildlife are pleased about the interest in the animals and the site, they hope that getting up close is a fleeting trend with no lasting beef. Kristen Hawthorne for KMTV, Ashford. Elsewhere in Ashford, a shop has lost its licence after a litre of vodka was sold to a 15-year-old girl. Sai convenience store in Sir John Forge Avenue reportedly sold alcohol and vapes to the teenager, who is in care without any age checks. Concerns were raised after the girl later became seriously unwell, requiring hospital treatment. Kent Police urged that revoking the licence was the only proportionate measure after the blatant breach of the law. to protect children and prevent further harm, despite arguments that it would cause the business to fold. There we can see pictures of the convenience store there. The shop owner says has 21 days to appeal the decision. Now it's time to take a look at the weather forecast for the coming days, but I've got a feeling that it's going to stay clear, so let's take a look. A clear night across the county with temperatures ranging from 9 to 11 degrees, wind speeds 9 and 10. Then into tomorrow morning, we've got ranges of 6 degrees to 9 degrees, warming up as we go from the west to the east of the county. Then we've got highs of 14 degrees in Ashford and Dartford into the PM, wind speeds staying moderate. Clear skies until Sunday, and then we've got cloudy skies on Monday. Temperatures across the board of 13 degrees, so maybe a good one to plan your weekend. Now it's time for another break, but coming up we'll be looking back at our top story this evening with Chloe Brewster bringing us the latest on the meningitis outbreak across Canterbury. She'll also be joining me on the sofa to talk a bit more about her experiences today and some statements from the Chemistry Club. Henry Luck also brings us a report on how a day centre in Maidstone has been completely transformed. So we'll see you very shortly with all of that and more. Looking forward to it. Bye-bye. Hello and welcome to Kent Tonight live on KMTV. I'm Kristen Hawthorne and here are your top stories on Thursday the 19th of March. Streeting steps into Canterbury. The Health Secretary announces a widening of vaccination programme.
We're expanding the availability of the vaccine today too, so we'll expect to see more people coming through.
Better estate of mind. Red Door Homes in Rochester offering to cover the cost of therapy for stressed staff.
So we deal with lots of traumatic stuff. We might deal with people who are victims of domestic violence, people who are, again, going through a divorce, going through financial difficulties. So all of that stuff has an impact on the staff.
And from the manosphere to movie manners, we'll be speaking to Chris Deasy on Louis Theroux and Brit's biggest cinema gripes. A look back at our top story this evening. Cases of meningitis will continue to increase. That's what the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care told reporters during his visit to the University of Kent Canterbury campus today. It comes as day 2 of the vaccine rollout continues and the government widened the net of those who are eligible. But are they going far enough to protect the people here in Kent? Chloe Brewster has been on the story all week and went down there today to try and put that question to the Health Minister.
The Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has been at the University of Kent Canterbury campus today as hundreds of worried students received a vaccine to protect them against the meningitis outbreak that's currently ripping through our county. The visit coincided with the announcement that the jab is being offered to more people. All staff and students at the University of Kent, regardless of age, can now get the vaccine. Canterbury Christchurch students and pupils at a few select secondary schools will have it too. It's unclear if staff at these organisations will have the opportunity to have the vaccine, like their Uni of Kent counterparts. Anyone who's been to club chemistry since the 5th of March can also have it. If you went clubbing there, you're being urged to come forward. There are still a lot of unanswered questions about the rollout, but KMTV and Kent Online couldn't ask the Minister, as local press was shut out from his visit, with only national media allowed in the building. However, he did have a few seconds on his way out, and he said this.
Yeah, I think we've seen a really, really brilliant response here. The way in which the NHS team has mobilised so quickly, they've done a great job. We're expanding the availability of the vaccine today too, so we'll expect to see more people coming through. We've got effective treatment through the antibiotics, an effective vaccination campaign. The risk here in Canterbury remains low and across the country extremely low, so I hope people can take confidence and reassurance from that.
The widening of the vaccine rollout begs the question, has an entire generation been let down by the government? While MenB vaccines began being offered to babies from 2015, teenagers off to university were never offered it, despite young adults being an at-risk group. That's why 40 MPs, including Canterbury's Rosie Duffield, are urging a catch-up vaccination programme for students.
As a parent here in Canterbury myself, I know that Year 13s are often at those clubs and mixed together, sometimes in the same groups as the uni students. And I think it is important to educate Year 13s, Year 12s even coming up to that age, and to vaccinate Year 13s if we can possibly do that and roll it out. It is odd that we have that weird cut-off date. I'm not sure why, because it's not as if this has gone away. So I think we need to look at that very seriously. We need to look at the education of younger people. This is a fact of life. This disease is out there. We do need to equip young people to just have a normal life, especially people who have suffered from the lockdown and the sort of horrible impact that had on your social lives. So yeah, I'd like that to just be seen as a normal thing, that you get vaccinated and therefore you're a lot safer.
The open letter by MPs read that no family should have to discover too late that protection was available, but not available to many on our NHS. The vaccine costs several hundred to buy in a pharmacy and is now sold out in several areas in Kent. As for the numbers, 1,500 have been vaccinated so far, and the total of confirmed and suspected cases on day 5 now is at 27. But by tomorrow morning, what will that number stand at, and will the Health Secretary have any clear answers about when this crisis will pass? Well, we hope he'll have the time to tell us if he ever returns to the county. Chloe Brewster for KMTV in Canterbury.
And Chloe joins me now to tell us more about what the experience was like there today. You were there with Kent Online as well. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so we knew that Wes Streeting was coming down today. We didn't know what time, where he'd be, or any of those details. So I'm based in Medway. I travelled up to Canterbury, as I have done the last few days. and headed to the sports centre where the students were getting their vaccinations at around 11. That is when West Streeting was there, but unfortunately we were not invited. We weren't invited to speak to him one-on-one. We weren't allowed into the sports hall. There were security guards stopping us from entering to speak to him. The best I could get was a Zoom through the door. He did come and speak to us after. He came and done a quick statement to tell us just overall what he was thinking about the situation and what the announcements were of the day, but that's not good enough. You know, we're based in Kent. We deserve to be able to ask the questions that our audiences want to know. It's also ironic because national media throughout this week has been approaching us, asking us how best to represent our county and who's the best to speak to and things like that. But when a big name comes along, we're not invited along to speak to him and put those questions to him.
Certainly, and there's also MPs calling for the expansion of the vaccine rollout as well. Can you tell me who they are and a bit about it?
So Rosie Duffield, as I mentioned in that report, also Jim Dixon, Sojan Joseph, those are just some of the names, and Helen Whately as well, who are urging for a rollout. They're urging specifically for the government to review how the vaccine is rolled out in schools, so whether that should be provided to secondary school students, as some other vaccines are. They also want to work with universities across the country to do a catch-up vaccination programme, so making sure this can't happen in other universities, because obviously this vaccine protects against future cases of meningitis rather than ongoing situations. They also want to improve awareness of students and families, for making sure students are aware that they shouldn't share vapes while on a night out or shouldn't share drinks. We also heard a little bit from Club Chemistry. They've been quite quiet over the last few days about what they think of this outbreak, but Louise, the owner, posted on Facebook quite late last night with letters to Keir Starmer, Wes Streeting and Rosie Duffield, basically calling for the government to look again at this gap of vaccine coverage that we were just talking about. You know, from 2015, only babies were receiving these vaccines. So Gen Z and our kind of age group have never received these Men B vaccines. She said the gap in vaccines has left an entire generation without protection. She also said she's been wrestling with whether it's right to raise a policy in the middle of a crisis, but she added the safety of the young people who visited her venue is what matters more than commercial consideration, and it's a shame now that her venue is now being thrown into all of this.
So if they do come out, we could be seeing many more queues as to what you were filming through the week.
Well, yeah, they've been cutting off queues recently. They've been stopping vaccines about midday. So we really need to see how this can be rolled out on a wider scale.
All right, thank you, Chloe. Now, an Ocean Photographer of the Year expedition is set to make a UK debut in Kent. The Ocean Photographer of the Year is set to open its exhibit at the historic dockyard in Chatham on Saturday, the 28th of March, planned to run until Monday, the 31st of March. The collection is set to feature a collection of 116 award-winning images capturing the beautiful life below the sea. The competition had received more than 15,000 entries worldwide to showcase these striking images, and certainly they are very striking indeed. Look at that. Lovely. A community hub has just undergone an exciting renovation. Golding Homes has transformed the Recular Day Centre in Maidstone and invited members of the public to take a look at the new facilities. Our community reporter Henry Luck has been down to the opening party to learn more.
This community space on Recluver Walk has just been rejuvenated for the public thanks to efforts from Golding Homes and Building Associations Limited. The Recluver Day Centre is now equipped to help residents with housing, complaints, group activities and food bank deliveries.
It's taken Golding Homes 3 weeks and just over £20,000 to transform this space in Maidstone, complete with accessible toilets, improved catering facilities and increased capacity for social activities.
This social value project was community-led. It's supposed to improve the space and allow users of all areas to use the space. It's not only for Golding Homes customers, it's for local residents, so that they can use it to improve their lives and they can access the facilities. Golding Homes staff also use the space to run community groups as well, and staff can operate from the space so that customers can come in and meet staff face to face, which we found always to be beneficial. It's better than speaking over the phone sometimes.
Maidstone Borough Council have also been involved in the project, witnessing its transformation.
I think it's a great initiative. I mean, it just goes to show what can be done when the community work together. It was social funds that Golding Homes managed to persuade the developers to pay some money, about 1% of the contract value, and that's provided the funds for this great development. Yes, it's super.
Well, it's wonderful to see this new project, and I've been in this place before the regeneration took place and the improvements, and it's going to be a fantastic facility for the community to use, and certainly an improvement from when I've seen it when it was a polling station, and I'm sure that the local community will benefit greatly from being able to use such a wonderful facility.
With this day centre now running better than ever, Seanark residents now have more than one thing to celebrate. Henry Luck for KMTV in Maidstone.
And of course, if you've been affected by anything we've talked about so far in our programme, head to the government website for more information in regard to meningitis. But for now, it's time for a quick break. But coming up, we'll be joined by Kent film expert Chris Deasy to discuss how a new documentary has brought attention to red pill content. All of that and more to come in a few minutes' time. See you then. Hello and welcome back to Kent Tonight live here on KMTV. Now, Don't forget you can keep up to date with all our latest stories across Kent by logging onto our website kmtv.co.uk. There you'll find all the reports, including this one about a British Sign Language choir.
This is not your average choir. Here, words take a back seat and your hands take centre stage.
This choir is very different to all the others. There is no singing involved unless you want to. All the words instead are done with your hands, the most important part in communicating with people who are deaf or hard of hearing.
Vision Signing Choir meet up every Thursday evening in Gillingham to bring people together for one sole reason: to sign. And this choir creates a community where everyone is welcome.
Like tonight, we're hearing, deaf, they can all come together, enjoy the music, whether they're feeling it, whether they've got hearing aids in, but we all mix together and we can sign and we can sing. Well, we don't really sing much, but we sign and we just enjoy the music and everyone can get together.
Other members of the choir say that it provides a safe space for those who are deaf or hard of hearing, especially when they may not have a space of their own.
It would be nice to have more spaces where deaf people feel comfortable and where they can communicate in their own language and feel a part of something, because they've had a lot of oppression over the years, a lot of their spaces have closed down.
This is Mina. She started to lose her hearing 9 years ago and often feels judged when she's out in public. That's when she and her daughter joined the choir.
You can tell people, sorry, can you face me? Can you speak clearly? And maybe for the first 2 minutes they will remember, but then they start to look away or they look down or they start to mumble. And when you can't keep asking them, can you repeat that? Can you repeat that? Because in the end you get, oh, never mind. So you just feel that, yeah, you're being judged.
The choir is open to seasoned pros and beginners alike, as they learn a new song almost every week. So I took this as an opportunity to learn some sign language myself. Though my signing does need some work, the environment allows for mistakes. And in a choir where voices aren't needed, the message of community is still being heard loud and clear. Naila Mohammed for KMTV in Gillingham.
And just before we get speaking to Chris, in case you missed it, let's take a look at the weather forecast for the coming days. A clear night across the county today, with temperatures ranging from 9 degrees to 11 degrees up there in Dartford, wind speeds 8 and 10. Then into tomorrow morning we have temperatures of 6 to 8, wind speeds lowering slightly. Then into the PM we've got ranges of 10 to 14, 14 in Dartford, Royal Tunbridge Wells and Ashford. Then we have clear skies until Sunday, partly cloudy skies on Monday, 13 degrees across the board, maybe one for a good weekend. And joins me now in the studio is presenter of the Kent Film Club, Chris DC, here to talk about the hot topic of etiquette in the cinema and the controversial documentary of Louis Theroux, Inside the Manosphere. So Chris, we've kind of talked a little bit about the Manosphere, but this documentary has just been newly released on Netflix. It's got a lot of talk on social media at the moment. Tell me what you think about it maybe so far upon what you've seen and what you've heard.
I find this so fascinating because there's this idea of, and I suppose you saw it with Trump in America as well, that question of who's enfranchised, who's disenfranchised, who feels that they are represented, whose voices are being heard. And then in a way sort of almost saying, and I think the film One Battle After Another, which did well at the Oscars, also touches on that, is almost like saying left wing, right wing, where do you stand? everyone has flaws, but let's almost try and make that into a conversation. It's also, I mean, I think Michael Moore started this off. Do you remember with Bowling for Columbine, and a few years later with the documentary that came out just before, as it turned out, George W. Bush's re-election, and that whole, Fahrenheit 9/11, and that question that really gets to the zeitgeist of where we stand and how that will affect our vote, and the way that these days people will go. And on social media, often it says so much about people's characters, the online self versus what they're like offline. And people who go on social media and start acting in a very vicious way in some cases that you think that's not the tame person at the office. So I think this is a very fascinating way of saying that do we all have, we used to use the expression of multiple hats, we all have different personas, and sometimes it's like, sometimes you might have a few drinks or something like that, and a different side of your personality will emerge. I think this really gets to the heart, and it's scary. I know women's groups have said it's essential viewing, but there are very few voices, female voices heard in this. But what does that say about where we are today?
And, there's a lot of talk in it about the red pill content, which comes from The Matrix. So this has obviously been a theme that's started a long time ago, but seems maybe now with politics and things happening in the world, it's becoming more and more common. Tell me about when that started with The Matrix and what the first reactions to that were, maybe when it first came out.
I remember, and I can even tell you the day I saw it. It was I think the 18th or the 11th of June 1999. And it's almost like in Sliding Doors has the same thing. You take this pill, this will happen. You take the other coloured pill, something else will happen. And that is life. How many of us don't look back and think, what if, what if? But these documentaries are also very clever at really saying that some people don't actually necessarily have that reflective mode. That sometimes people just go all guns blazing and say, right, this is the way we should be. And often if we were perhaps a bit more reflective or self-critical, perhaps we could be a bit calmer. Maybe some people don't want calm. They want anger, because anger is what people will listen to.
Yeah, and in terms of documentation and films, they hold a certain level of responsibility. Is it good or bad, do you think, to influence people through the use of films on maybe everyday issues or topical moments in politics?
Well, one thing it's going to do, and Louis Theroux is brilliant at this with some of the documentaries he's made about people who later it turned out were even more ghastly than we may have thought they were eccentric, and the Jimmy Savile one is a good example. But what they tend to do is ask those really important questions about what makes people tick in a particular time and place. They get to that very heart of the sort of questions that are going to polarize us, the way that you pit people, often in the same communities, often in the same workplaces, against each other. And I think in that sense it's important, but also it's difficult viewing, because for me, that sort of polarization is great to observe, but also, it's just as when somebody says to me, which football team do you support, or what's your view on this? Sometimes you think, hang on a minute, whatever answer I give, in the eyes of some people, will be the wrong one.
Well, and now we've also got this other topic about film etiquette.
Ooh.
Do you believe such a term exists, and is there any proper way we should act in a movie theatre? As a film expert, what would be your ideal way?
Well, I literally practice what I preach, because I go to the cinema all the time.
Well, that's it.
My fear, and I walk, I feel my heart pounding. What if somebody's in my seat? And it has happened. And somebody you walk into, often it might be an almost empty auditorium, but somebody's chosen the very seat where you're meant to be. And you then have to either find another seat, which is actually the worst thing you can do, because then you're taking somebody else's seat potentially. Or people who walk in and they think, oh, there's no one sitting in front of me, I'll just put my coats in front of me. And then, of course, somebody's in the seat and they're like, well, hang on, but somebody's seat, coat is draped over my seat. And the person reluctantly wants to remove them. There's all these things, people making noise, putting their phones on. I was at a cinema last night and a couple just arrived as the film was beginning. And because it was all dark, they put their light on. But for some reason, they seemed to be illuminating the entire auditorium. And I was almost like blinded at one point. And I was just thinking, where is this coming from? Is the light being reflected? It's things like that. I wonder if people forget that they're not in their living rooms. I feel like almost a subject of Louis Theroux here. You've got me animated on this. And it's very interesting. And there have been times, I'll be honest, I've gone to see a film a second time with a different audience just because my view the first time was very much coloured by what I was witnessing in the auditorium. And I saw Jojo Rabbit one year, twice, one with a younger audience who were laughing at some of the humour, which I found really uncomfortable. Then I watched it with a much more civilised older audience, and suddenly the irony of the film really came out. So we don't all have time to watch films multiple times, but I do think that watching the audience is as important sometimes as watching the film.
So as an avid appreciator of films and going to the cinema, do you reckon that there should be something put in place to prevent people maybe ruining the film for others by talking too loud during it, being on their phones, maybe eating loud crisps or something?
Absolutely. I mean, staff come in, I mean, in some cinemas, I mean, sometimes it actually is over extreme that they sometimes come in and they almost like stand in front of everyone and they have a little device just to see if anybody is recording the film. And there have been occasions, like watching a horror film, a really quiet moment, and suddenly somebody appears, and once I actually jumped out of my seat, it was just a member of cinema staff. But to be fair, they're making sure that things are okay. And there are times when things like the lighting isn't, or the lights aren't dimmed, or actually I was at a cinema last week, the film didn't come on, and it turned out there was a problem with the print, and they had to reset it, so somebody had to go out and tell them. It's things like that that you just need to have a dialogue. What you don't want, shall I tell you what the worst thing happened once? Somebody shouted at another person in the audience because they were making a lot of, had their phone on, and that disruption was worse than the disruption of the person with the phone. So don't police it yourself.
Okay, well, I wish you the best in your future cinema. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. All right, you've been watching Kent Tonight Live here on KMTV. There's more news made just for you throughout the evening. We'll be back here at 8 p.m. See you then. Bye-bye.